Welcome back to Next Stage Podcast, everybody. We got Mike Godette in the studio today. He's got, or actually not officially in the studio, he's zooming in to us, but we're going to be talking about his music stuff. He is, I know him primarily as a guitar player. He's got a bunch of YouTube videos up, and he does instructional things. He kind of dissects and breaks down songs, explains some of the theory behind them and all that. And he's got original music as well. So we're going to get into his world and see what's going on. I understand, as he was filling me in, that adapting to the new climate with doing YouTube videos and things like that to reach people has been an adjustment lately. So I guess, maybe let's talk about why you started doing that. I mean, I think we know why, but if you can talk about the process of what got you going on this YouTube channel and, doing what you do with that.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me on for this. So basically, the YouTube thing, it's interesting because I started it about 2 years ago, mostly because I was following a lot of different YouTubers, and I started to see that people were kind of making a living in this digital, space, using YouTube and different things as the medium. And then I actually was giving lessons to a kid, and his sister made a living off of YouTube. And I started talking to her, and she said that she was making 15 grand a month, if you can believe that. And granted, it's far different than showing licks out of a diminished scale, or, she's not doing anything like that. She's doing very kind of female oriented, like doing makeup and trying on clothes and posting, kind of sexualized videos and stuff like that. So completely different from what I am doing with my music stuff. But that was kind of like the first moment where something went off, and I was like, oh, wow, there's really like some opportunities to be made through YouTube and stuff like that. So then I kind of got a little bit more serious about it. And I just kind of, saw the writing on the wall with kind of the world we're living in and how everything is now in this digital space. And then with coronavirus happening, I mean, that was kind of like everything culminating into, where we're at now, and kind of making it more apparent than ever that this sort of digital world that we're living in is going to become more and more and more part of kind of our everyday reality and stuff like that. So it's a really weird time being a musician, because, gigs are few and far between currently, unfortunately. So to have some sort of outlet like this, like my YouTube channel, where I can kind of, give people a little bit of an idea of all the different things that I'm into. I have a very diverse taste of music. I went to school for jazz, but I've kind of always been all over the place. I've always been really into metal and classical and rap. I mean, all over the place. So it's kind of a good outlet for me because I can take whatever I'm currently interested in and either do like maybe a lesson video analyzing a cool song from a certain group, or doing a transcription, doing some sort of jazz thing. So it's kind of evolved into that. And I'm just kind of constantly now trying to think of new things I can add to the channel, try to get more people involved, try to kind of build a community of like-minded people who just like to, nerd out about music and just spread some more positivity in the world. I think music is a great tool for doing that. We live in a very divisive, I never know how to say that word, a very divisive time, unfortunately. And I think music always has the tendency to bring people together and put a little bit more positivity in the world. And that's one of the things that I love about your guys' podcast is you guys aren't afraid to nerd out. Like I'll see the stuff on Instagram, like the top 5, whatever, like lists and stuff like that. Like I love stuff like that. And I've been doing a lot of stuff like that on my channel too, just trying to get groups of people together, and we do Zoom calls like this, and we kind of just do some long form discussions, breaking stuff down, going over maybe some top 10 lists, or discussing albums and stuff like that. And to me, I think that's a good thing to kind of just continue to put out in the world, especially right now. I think people can use some of that, so that's pretty much the main thing that I've been trying to do as of late, really just focus on the channel and just see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, man, thank you for the kind words you said about what we're doing, and I'm glad that you're a kindred spirit in those ways. But it sounds like you've realized there are things that we've lost through this about music and the ability to perform, but you've kind of hit on a lot of things that are maybe opportunities that we've maybe gained, where you said you can spread yourself out, do different genres, get into different things that maybe you wouldn't be performing. Like, do you find it has opened up more things for you than would have otherwise been only on the performance route?
That's a great question. So in terms of things outside of the performance route, definitely. I mean, there were definitely certain things where I probably wouldn't have thought of doing them if it wasn't for the coronavirus stuff, because everybody, maybe not so much now, people are starting to go out a little bit more now, and things are getting not normal, but closer to normal than they were at the beginning. I mean, the beginning was terrifying. Like nobody knew anything about this. And at least I was terrified. I was staying home. I was getting all my groceries delivered. I wasn't doing anything. And if I did go out, I'd be wearing like gloves and like a couple layers of gloves and the mask. It was hardcore. But because of that, because we were forced into that environment, it definitely kind of made me think like, all right, well, what are some things I can do with these new resources that I'm kind of getting acclimated with? Like I didn't know anything about Zoom until, as I'm sure most people didn't until coronavirus. So like a couple of things that I was able to start doing, which was fun, was I started just interviewing some jazz guitar players, because there are some jazz guitar guys that I've taught with at camps before, I've played with, or I've talked to, who are pretty like well respected people in the jazz community. And I was thinking like, well, this is great. I should use this as an opportunity to maybe see if I could just do some interviews with them through Zoom and just kind of pick their brain about all different elements of their career and even just their personal life, just kind of getting to know them more as a person. Similar to what you do with a lot of the people in the Connecticut music scene. I think there's just so many great musicians out there from all over, and it's nice to be able to see them in an environment like this, and get to know them as a person more and kind of break things down with them. So I started doing more of that. And then in terms of like some of these videos where I'll do like a top 10 list and stuff like that, that's all entirely because of Corona. It was basically just a way of saying, well, so many people are home right now. So what are some things that I can do to take advantage of the fact that like, we're all kind of confined to our houses right now and we're doing everything on the computer. And it was good. I've been doing it for a little while now, and I've definitely built like a little community of people that kind of come and do different videos on my channel. I have one podcast where it's just like a super nerdy podcast where we talk about the Beach Boys. I'm like super into the Beach Boys. So I found some people on Reddit, and we've been doing that. We've done like 7 episodes so far. And then some of these interviews and, just little things like that. So to answer your question, those are kind of a few things that have been new additions to my life because of the current environment that we're in.
And what do you think that allows you to explore with music? Because I see in your videos, you not only like show how to play, you're throwing the theory in there. You're not necessarily trying to like give someone a strict lesson. You're just putting it out there as you're explaining some of the theory. And I think maybe with what you're doing with interviewing people in the jazz community or elsewhere, you're kind of like digging deeper in there. Do you think between those two combined, ways you're exploring music in this, video virtual medium, that you're able to put some of the, more, I don't want to say like, you keep saying nerdy aspect, but I don't like that word, but like the behind the scenes theory of how music works out to people in a way that might be more palatable than like reading a book or trying to like, Google music theory?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think a lot of what I try to do is I try to take a lot of information and see if I can package it in like a condensed version that somebody can watch. And, even if they don't necessarily digest the entire video and the entire lesson on, let's say it's like a chord progression to a song, like to be able to take sort of a complex idea and be able to package it in a way that's a little bit easier for people to grasp. And just to echo what you're saying about the term nerdy, it's funny because I've thought about that before too. Like it has a very negative connotation to it, but it's really more of like a positive word, because usually anytime somebody's described as nerdy, it just means that they're really passionate about something, which to me is like great. I mean, I love nerdy people, like when I said like I love how you guys nerd out, like that's like a compliment, to me. For in my world, I'm just like, that's a great thing, you want to be nerdy. But it is weird how like kind of that word does have a sort of a negative connotation to it. But I'm sorry, what was the question? What were we just talking about?
No, it's okay. I was saying like the way that you're able to explore, as you said, with the new online way of doing videos, is you can throw some of that stuff in while still giving, an instructional, showing how to play something, kind of dissecting a song or talking to other musicians, where like that kind of information might not be apparent to somebody who's just watching music being performed. Because if you're a observer who doesn't really know much about it, or maybe you're starting off and playing and you don't know like the stuff behind the scenes that makes a song work or not, if you're able to like go a little bit deeper into that, is that's giving people a richer experience than just a performance alone.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a lot of people say too, like if I'm doing a video where I'm explaining a chord progression to a song, I've had people say like, wow, I never realized like all that stuff was going on underneath it, you know? So it can sort of take, like you were saying, take something that's not really in a live setting now. And it's just like a different way of presenting something to an audience where it can give them a different way of looking at it. Um, and, you know, it's great because I have a very curious mind. I've always been that way. So it's great for me because most of the videos that I make are not things that I actually know prior to making the video. I pretty much learn them just for the videos. So I'm constantly listening to songs. I'll be like, all right, because I have a series called Cool Chords, which is where I just break down a cool chord progression to a song. And most of those songs I didn't know ahead of time. Like usually if I'm listening and I hear something that catches my ear, I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. Like I could do a video on that. And then it's great for me too, because then it's helping me. Like, you know, like I said, I have a very curious mind. So it's giving me something to explore as well. So it works great both ways, you know, because it's helping me put out stuff that other people might find useful if they're learning a certain thing. And then it's also just stuff for me to explore as well.
Yeah. Have you found that does anybody like contact you about doing lessons? Like, do you give actual private lessons at all? Like, has this expanded who's interested in what you're doing? Have you gotten people as students or whatever? I'm not sure if you do that professionally or not, but
Yeah, that's my main job. That's pretty much my full-time job during the day is giving lessons. And I've been doing that since I started in my junior year of high school, but I wasn't doing it full time until I graduated college. So I've always done that. Most of the people that I do that with, though, are young kids and stuff like that. I go to kids' houses after schools and stuff. And then there's a music studio in Fairfield that I work at as well. And that's been virtual still ever since COVID. So I've been doing that from my house. But I have gotten some people that have reached out about lessons. I have this one kid in Australia who's been doing lessons every week through the channel. So yeah, and it's interesting because that's another thing about the online stuff is that it's not ideal and stuff like that, but it does help you reach an entire different audience that they can't be there in a physical form. So like for me to be able to make videos and then I get contacted by somebody in Australia, like that's pretty cool, and it works in other areas too. Like one thing that I did during this COVID thing, this is kind of off topic, but I saw a stand-up comedy show on Zoom and it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be actually, because the guy did a lot of crowd work and stuff. It was Judah Friedlander. He's in 30 Rock. But it was so cool because you see people, it was like a big Zoom call and you see people from like China and from like Romania and like all over the place. And these people would never be able to see this comedian otherwise, so it's cool that it does kind of give some new opportunities in all these different areas.
Yeah, definitely that reach being broadened because people are more engaging in that style now. I can see a lot of opportunities there. But as a music educator in general, seeing as that's a main part of what you do, what do you find connects to people most with music when you're teaching them things
and they have that like aha moment of like understanding something? Like, how often do you feel that like breaking through a wall where someone's learning something new and they're getting like turned on in a way from what you've taught them?
That's you ask great questions. I love your interviewing style. So that's tricky. And for me, I've kind of always based it off of my own experience as a student. And I might say some things here that are controversial to some guitar teachers, probably more older guys. We'll get into what the controversial thing is. But so when I first started guitar lessons, I started in 5th grade and I was really excited about starting. I had a friend that came over and he bought an electric guitar. And, back then you would plug it in and you would just hit the strings and make like a ton of noise. And you thought that was like the coolest thing ever, So I was like fired up when I heard that. I was like, I want to get a guitar. I remember I saved my own money. I don't know how I was able to save money in 5th grade, but I did something. but I saved up $150 and I bought a guitar, and then I went and I took lessons. And pretty much all the lessons consisted of was like I was sitting in a room with this teacher, and he gave me like this note reading book, and we were just reading notes on like the first and second and third string. And like it's good to know that and stuff like that, but none of that really like fired me up and got like a spark in me where I wanted to practice all the time. So, fast forward a couple of years, I wasn't serious at all when I started out. I actually wanted to quit at a couple of points, and my parents kept me doing it. Thank God, forever grateful that they did that. But what had happened was I stumbled on ultimateguitar.com, and I found like AC/DC tabs. Right. Yeah, it's part of our generation. We're the ultimate guitar generation. And I didn't know what tabs were at the time. So I was like, what is this? What are these numbers and these lines? And I taught myself how to play tabs. And at that point, I learned the intro to Back in Black. And that was like, I have a very vivid memory of that. That was like a game changer for me, because that was the first time where I was like, oh, wait, like I could actually play the stuff that I like on the guitar. Prior to then, I didn't even know that was an option, because all I was doing was note reading with this other teacher. So the controversial thing that I will say, and it's probably not to you guys at all, but I do think using tabs when you're teaching can be a good resource sometimes to get kids out of that frame of mind. If you could figure out a way to show a kid something that they like to listen to, that they've heard a bunch of times on the radio, and they can see themselves duplicated on the instrument, that can be a really transformative experience for the kid. And sometimes tabs are the only way to do that, in a sense of like, let's say they want to learn like a song by Ed Sheeran, and it's got like a couple notes that like have, sharp notes, or it's up in a different position, like something that they just don't know how to read. I mean, you know how it is reading on guitar. It takes forever to be able to go all over the neck. So I think in terms of that is one of the tools. It's almost kind of for me like a get out of jail free card. Like if a kid is really just not, learning, or it doesn't seem like they're enjoying it, I'll try to see if I can figure out like, okay, what do you like to listen to? Give me a list of people, give me some songs, give me anything. And some kids are no help. Some kids will say that they don't even listen to music, which I can't wrap my head around that. I mean, I don't even know what that means. But so if I could do that, if sometimes that can be a turning point with kids. But I mean, some kids just unfortunately are just doing it because their parents want them to do it, and it's just hard really to get through to them no matter what you do. But I try to make the lessons as enjoyable as possible. I pretty much try to maintain a balance between showing them stuff that they like to listen to, but also teaching them the foundations and the things that you should know as a musician. And some people put a lot of stock in like note reading, like particularly older guitar teachers. Like there are a lot of older guitar teachers that get really mad at the idea of using tabs, which is why I said it's kind of controversial. Because if you bring up tabs around the wrong guitar teacher, some people get really mad. It reminds me of like that thing where they say, don't bring up politics around your family. It's like, you don't bring up guitar tabs around older teachers, because some teachers, they have this idea, if you use tabs, they'll say that you're like a fraud and you're not a legitimate teacher, which I've never subscribed to that thought process. But to answer your question, I would say that's kind of one of the things that I have done that I can see like a transformation with the student. That, and then maybe just getting them to do a performance, whether it's a recital or even just record a video of them doing something and put it on Instagram or something like that. That can, little things like that can make a difference, I think.
Yeah, there are so many different ways to engage with music. And because it's, based on the ear, hearing first, not everybody has the ability to visually interpret and then recode in their brain's auditory. Some people learn by ear very naturally and could never read. So I think you're right. There's some unnecessary roadblocks that are put up with this, learn how to read music. Otherwise, you're, not legitimate. That I think deters a lot of people.
So that's great that you're able to see past that.
As I was saying, I like that you do throw the theory in when you're showing things, but you're not making that the main focus. Because you probably do find this, that some students are willing to dig deeper, and some, like, they're just never going to go further than learning what they want. And you probably have to gauge how each student is. There can't be one style fits all, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And a lot of people try to teach in that manner where they have one teaching method that they do with every single student. And I guess if you're really good at that method and you've worked out things throughout the years to make it be as effective as possible, that can be good. But I always think it's better if it's more personalized, because everybody's going to have different musical goals and needs. And like you said, everybody learns in a different way. So it's, the idea that you're going to take one method and it's just going to apply to every single kid. I don't necessarily think that's the most effective way to go about doing that.
And you mentioned about sometimes it's getting someone to perform, because it's strange how music, there's a lot of different varieties. Like there are people who compose wonderful music that will never perform. There are people who are, studio arrangers who you're never going to see on the stage. And then there's some people who performing is their thing, and if you put them in the studio, they're miserable. Talk about that dynamic of like, do you think there's just different types of people, and one person is going to be inclined towards a certain preference and one is going to be inclined towards another? Like, is that like a
personality type, do you think, in general, of why someone would want to perform or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just real quick, do you your screen just went black? It said something about
Oh,
plugging in a power source.
oh, keep
Yeah, I don't
going.
know
I
if
think
I
they might
wasn't
have
sure if you saw
unplugged
it or not.
something. Um,
Oh,
it
okay.
yeah.
But that's a really interesting question. There's a lot of different types of musicians, and I've definitely met people in my life where they're like these ridiculous musicians, but they don't really play out much, and a lot of people don't know who they are. And then a lot of other people who know them and know how great they are, they're always kind of like on their case, like, oh, you got to go out more, you got to meet more people need to hear you play. And I think certain types of people just don't really care about that kind of stuff. I think some people are much more introverted, and they they could get more desire out of just staying home on a Saturday night and practicing some exercises out of like an etude book. They could get more satisfaction out of that than going out and playing and having people hear them. So I think it's all very personal. I'm kind of in between. Obviously I love gigging and stuff like that, but I'm very introverted as well, which is one of the things that's nice about the YouTube, is it kind of allows me to do stuff that I love doing. I love practicing. I love researching stuff. I love writing stuff out. And that's all stuff that's completely separate from actually performing, and I love performing too. But I would say for me, I'm kind of in the middle of those two things where um, I do like kind of like staying home a lot, so like when Corona started and they said, you know, don't go out, that was like not an issue with me at all. As with a lot of introverted people, I would say they're like, okay, yeah, I got that covered. But yeah, I think that's pretty much um the gist of it. I would say like I'm kind of in between, and then some people are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Some people like, need to play every week and stuff like that just to kind of like keep themselves going. It's almost kind of like a vitamin for them,
Yeah, no, I agree. I kind of relate more to that
that
side.
side?
I'm
I'm
like the
like the
performing
performing
side.
side.
But
But
that
that
also
also
opens
opens
up
up
the
the
idea
idea
of
of
the
the
different
different
ways
ways
music
music
can
can
be
be
consumed,
consumed,
because
because
there's a
there's a
very
very
big
big
difference in
difference in
my
my
mind
mind
to
to
a
a
studio
studio
recording
recording
as
as
opposed
opposed
to a
to a
performance.
performance.
And
And
sometimes
sometimes
the
the
studio
studio
recording
recording
might
might
not
not
be
be
the
the
same
same
as
as
the
the
performance,
performance,
or
or
the
the
performance
performance
adds
adds
something
something
extra.
extra.
There's
There's
almost
almost like two different worlds. Like the recorded music world is almost its own art form compared to the performing world, and sometimes they match up, but it's kind of, I don't know. I get into like a battle in my mind as to like which one is better, and I'm thinking like maybe neither one. They're just different, And sometimes people want to talk about, oh, they're not a real artist, they just hide in the studio, or like what they do in the studio they can't do live, or and I wonder if there's really like, should they be considered as two different worlds?
Hmm. That's very interesting, because especially nowadays, because you have so many people now who are just, you know, making stuff in a studio, and you're not really sure what's going on behind the scenes to get this music happening. And then if they don't duplicate it live, you really have no idea what's going on. Particularly with a lot of like this very overly produced, like a lot of this very like modern pop, and even like a lot of like the mumble rapping and stuff like that, where you see them live and you can't even tell if they're lip sync. It sounds like they might be lip syncing to the song. You're like, are they actually doing this? So yeah, that is interesting. I feel like it could be two completely different things, but I do think in terms of like musicianship and stuff like that, I think it's always important to be able to duplicate whatever you're doing in a live setting, ideally, because I think that's the ultimate sign that, you're honing in on your craft and exactly what you're doing and stuff like that. And it's interesting because I was watching a documentary about Todd Rundgren, and he produced a ton of albums in the 70s. And he was saying that one of the things that was an issue with him was a lot of the bands that he was producing, they would come in with all of this written material and they wouldn't have it ready to record because they didn't do a tour. He said all the best bands were people who were coming fresh off of a tour after playing all of the music and stuff like that, and then they'd be ready to go. But if they just came right in with this new stuff and tried to record it, like it took way longer, it was way much more of a hassle. So I think, figuring out, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if they're two separate things. But I think in this day and age, it seems like that probably it is. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's
I have
like
to think about that more.
well, yeah, it's a tough question. I still struggle with it, but there's something about it's like because music can be strictly heard. You can put it on headphones, you can listen to it on speakers. You don't have to have the visual element, but there is something different when someone's performing it. And I wonder, like, because the music can be like separate from a human. We have computers that can create music now without a human necessary. You can program it and do whatever. But then there's the human element where when you hear someone live and maybe their voice cracks a little bit or they flub a note or there's these other little like ugly tinges that make it that a person's doing it is not being strictly created digitally and perfect. That I wonder which what do we respond to more, because melody is cerebral but then feeling is not, and music's both of those at once, so it's kind of like a perpetual tug of war between those things.
Yeah, and it's different depending on what kind of music you're listening to too. When you're talking about what was the thing you just said? You said melody is what was that? It was a good
I said like melody is like more cerebral, but like the feeling is maybe more physical. Did I say? I don't know what I said exactly, but it's like you can have the melody, like as you're talking about someone learning music, sight reading is one thing, but when you could just bang out AC/DC on a guitar, you're like, I feel that. They're
right.
Two different things.
Right.
Looking, and you can have perfect melodies that are all arranged and you can hear it very, clearly in one way, but then when someone like, I don't know, a Janis Joplin is just wailing on stage, you're like, you can't write that down.
Right. Right. And it's interesting when you go from certain kinds of music to other kinds, because you'll hear certain things and it's just so raw and so human. Like, I think a great example of that is Nick Drake. Like, whenever I listen to Nick Drake, particularly the Pink Moon album, it's just him and his guitar, and it just sounds like you're right there with him, just in the room, and everything is so natural and pure and just such beautiful music. But then you go from that to like, kind of an extreme example, but something like that compared to like maybe like some modern rap song or something like that, where it's all completely programmed. The lyrics, the vocals have the auto tune on it and stuff like that. And it's interesting because some people, I think it's especially the case now with a lot of the modern rap stuff, a lot of people aren't necessarily listening for like the lyrics or the vocal stuff anymore. It's kind of more just like the overall vibe. Like, one of the most cliche things that people say is like, I don't really like the singing, but I love the beat. So people are just listening to the song like because they like the vibe, like they're just tuning out the vocal stuff altogether. And that's from a completely like the complete opposite ends of the spectrum when we're talking about somebody like Nick Drake or Janis Joplin or something like that, where it's so pure and so raw. And then you have this other thing where it's completely programmed and it's made by a computer. Obviously there's a producer at play and stuff like that, but it's, no live instruments for the most part and stuff like that. But people are getting like so much enjoyment out of that side of things too. So it's a very weird time for music.
But yeah, some stuff, I kind of put it in the term of like sonic wallpaper. Like, it's there and it's pretty and it's like fine, like, but you don't really connect with it. What do you think is like the human element that makes people connect with music? Like, you give the example of Nick Drake, but are there maybe specific things that you've come across, or maybe even general things if we're teaching students, whatever, like what is that human thing that separates it from just being notes on paper?
Another great question. I got to think about that one for a second. Um, I think it's different with everybody. Everybody has different things that appeal to them, which is why that's one of the things that's so interesting to me about doing like these top 10 videos. I'll do like top 10 songs with people, and you'll have these people where like they like a song that you might not be crazy about, and they give their reasoning, and it makes total sense. But like for you and what you look for and stuff like that, it's just not anything that you can relate to. So it's a tough one to kind of quantify into one specific thing. But I would say one thing that I have noticed with certain kids that I teach is being able to sing, I think, is a really good thing. I think the human voice, being able to at least match the pitches on whatever instrument you're playing to your voice. I notice like sometimes kids will be playing a song and then they start singing the words as they're playing on the guitar. And that seems to be like kind of like a thing where it seems like they're resonating more and more with the music. They're internalizing it, right? Obviously, because you're singing it, you're internalizing it to some extent. But what was the question again? I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
No, you did hit it. I was just asking like what the human element
Is in music, that makes it more alive than just the notes on the paper. And I think you did answer it by saying when it starts to resonate with you. And for some people, that is when they're singing along, but there's probably other ways that it can resonate with you, but it's that human element getting through to it.
And I think there are certain things that are very specific to certain musicians. Like if you get to know somebody's music really well, you'll hear things that are very like an example is like, I love Brian Wilson, being a huge Beach Boys fan. And there are times where I'm listening to his songs and I'll hear this little chord progression or this little vocal harmony. And I'm just like, that's just totally Brian. And that's what I'm resonating with, is like that character, almost like a person's character coming out through their music. And for me, I would say that's kind of like the stuff that I tend to resonate with, is these people that I grow to really respect and love, and I really kind of get into all of their discography. And then I kind of just internalize some of those sounds that I think are specific to them, and I hear them come out in other spots,
Yeah, it's like if you see somebody in a movie like Robert De Niro or Al Pacino, they might have certain mannerisms that's totally them, that even though they're playing a character, you still know it's
Right.
them. And people like certain actors throughout time because of that. And do you think that we have lost some of that in modern music, or has it just changed to where it's now the producer that's more having that character as opposed to the performer, where you can tell a producer's done something on a track and maybe they're kind of like the more stars now than the actual person who's like put on the picture to sell the music?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you and Jeff Morrow were talking about this in the last episode, where Jeff was saying how the interesting thing about nowadays is that production wise, you have more tools at your disposal than ever before in terms of creative freedom and stuff like that. So I do think that is true, because it's funny. I was teaching a kid he wanted to learn how to play Chop Suey by System of a Down the other day. And like I was playing, it's like such a badass song, such a crazy riff. And as I was playing it with him, I was thinking to myself, I was like, when I was in middle school, like everybody knew the words to this song. Like this was what people were listening to. And I just can't, for the life of me, imagine like kids nowadays liking a song like that. So it seems like it has made a transformation from kind of the more organic, like full band, like everybody's contributing, like you can see what's going on, to more of that kind of overly produced, like there's kind of people behind the scenes that are pulling a lot more strings than we're aware of. So I do think something has been lost in that, but music constantly goes through phases. And I'm not one of these people that says like all music nowadays is bad. Of course there's so much good music, but at the same time there's more music now than ever before. So it's kind of overwhelming to even know where to start. I mean, like every day I'm going through Instagram and my friends are like, oh, I just released this on Bandcamp. I have this over here. And it becomes overwhelming to even know where to get started a lot of the time,
Yeah, you're right.
There has been this in the mainstream old established record company thing, like this assembly line approach. But then there's this like kind of white noise of everyone can put anything out whenever they want. It's kind of like when you go into a venue and the bathroom is just covered with stickers of every band that's ever played. They're all overlapping. You're like, how am I ever going to see one of them? And like, what do you think
Right.
people could do to cut through that clutter? Is there a way to cut through some of that clutter?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I really don't know because if I was able to do it, I would let you know. I don't know. I think the main
You
thing
wouldn't be
is
talking
just
to me.
I don't know. I think the main thing is no. I would definitely talk to you. I mean, because we come from the same area, we know a lot of the same people. I'm happy to be doing this. But to me, I think all I try to do is just do my own thing and do what makes me happy, and hopefully there will be other people that resonate with that. And I know that I know one of the things that kind of inspired me to do my YouTube channel is I am like I was saying all over the place in terms of like my tastes and stuff like that. So I figured like I could probably do things that can resonate with a lot of different music fans from different all over the different styles, all over the place and stuff like that. So I think just being true to whatever you like and doing what makes you happy in the end is like the most important thing. And that's why like I've the whole idea of like clickbait and doing things just to get views. So many people have told me like, oh, you should just cover a Taylor Swift song or do that. Like, and I'm not going down that route. Like that just doesn't feel right to me. Some people can do stuff like that and that's fine. Um, but to me, I just always want to put out stuff that's very authentic to who I am and what I like and see if I can culminate, a community of people around that. And that seems to be a common trend that people are doing more and more online now. So I figured, now is a better time than ever to, see what happens with that.
Yeah, man, I think you nailed it with that. I mean, in the world we are now with so much production line overproduced sort of things, being authentic, being honest and natural, just like in many other aspects of life, with diet, with exercise, people are, wanting to get into more to natural things and then hiking, and people want handmade things that have, the hammer marks of when it was nailed, by the blacksmith, or like carved out of wood. All of these like natural, organic, knowing that another human was involved with it actually is becoming what people, are attracted to now. Maybe as a sort of kickback against the super digital produced sheen of like, the robots taking over sort of feel. So I agree with you, man, that I think that's the way to do it, and that whatever sticks to your soul and is resonating with you is probably going to attract the right kind of people to what you're doing.
And it seems like nowadays too, there's not as many, I don't know if click would be the right word, but I'll use that. There's not as many clicks as there used to be. Like when I was in high school, there would very clearly be like the classic rock kids, the rap kids, the kids that were into like Motion City Soundtrack and Death Cab for Cutie and stuff like that. And then there was like kind of more like the redneck people who are into country and stuff like that. And I feel like now that's not as much the case. Now it's kind of seems like everybody's kind of blended together and everybody kind of has like their own like kind of niche interests that are kind of all over the place. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's just a really bizarre time for music and just, teaching kids and getting a little like insight into what kids are listening to. It's not like it was when we were, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming we're around the same age. How old are you?
35.
Oh, okay. I'm 29. So like our generation, it was much different, I think, in terms of what was on the radio and what was popular, like I was saying with the System of a Down thing. But I mean, I have a lot of young kids that I give lessons to, and they think Eminem is like a bad rapper. I'm just like, what? Are you kidding me? It's like if you were around when he first came out, you would realize how ridiculous of a statement that is. You know, um,
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone becomes a dinosaur at some point, unfortunately. So I guess I would, in saying like wrapping this up is what would you hope to see music continue to do for people? Is there a thing that you've seen that maybe goes from the music that you were interested in when you were younger, and maybe even your parents and beyond, that you see as a through line that can project forward, that despite the many changing trends, is there something that's like essential that kind of goes across all these boundaries and generations that might be still going on?
wow, wow, that's deep. That's a tough one. I got to think for a second. I don't know. I don't know if I've thought that long term about it. Maybe that's something I should be thinking about. um, I mean, it seems like, at the end of the day, it seems like if you are a good musician and you're a good person, there will be opportunities. So I think, as long as people kind of always have standards for what they want and standards from musicians, um, uh, I don't know. I'm kind of fumbling right now. That's a tough one to answer. But I would say maybe that's kind of like the red lining is, all the people that I know that are good musicians, they're usually always doing well for the most part. I mean, now is a very specific time, which I wouldn't use this to gauge like everyday life. You know what I mean? But before all this and stuff like that, it seemed like if you're doing your part, you're being a good person, you're easy to work with, you're punctual, you do all the right things and you can play your instrument well, I think that's great. One thing that I would like to see happen in the future is the copyright laws with other people's music. I'd like to see some changes done with that, because one thing that did happen with my YouTube channel is I got a copyright strike for a lesson video that I did. And I understand the reasoning behind it, but I think one avenue that I think a lot of people, a lot of musicians are going to always need to sort of fall back on is teaching. And a lot of the copyright laws makes it really tricky to monetize your online teaching. So a quick story about this. Um, I do a video every Tuesday called the Lick of the Week, and it's where I transcribe a lick from a different musician, and I write it down, and then I play a video, or I play the lick, and then I show it the writing of the lick on the screen, and then I explain it, and I show you the fingering, and I talk about the theory behind it and stuff like that. And when my YouTube channel got monetized, I had assumed that those videos were fine. I could monetize them because it's just a lick that somebody is playing from a solo, and I'm not using any of the original material and stuff like that. I'm playing the lick myself. And then one day I just get like an email saying that I got a copyright strike from a video by, do you know the guitarist Frank Mbali?
No.
He's like a really good fusion guitar player. He played with like Chick Corea's electric band. Uh, still plays one of the scariest guitar players ever. Like one of the kings of like sweep picking, but not like in a metal sense, more in like a jazz fusion sense. But I guess like his team reported my video, and I got a copyright strike. And I was doing some research, and they have these things called fair use laws, which I wasn't aware of any of this. So, I take ownership for, if the copyright strike was warranted, that's completely on me because I didn't do any research. I just kind of assumed that it was fine. But basically, the way that fair use works is that you can use little snippets of material for educational purposes, but you can't monetize it. So basically, all of my videos that were derivative of somebody else's stuff, any video where I'm doing a lesson explaining chords and stuff like that, I had to demonetize all those videos. And I understand the argument as to why that is the case. But at the same time, especially with the current environment, I think stuff like that does make it's like another roadblock for musicians who are trying to make a living, even if it's just through teaching. And I don't necessarily think that you're exploiting someone else's stuff by teaching it, because I've had tons of people that have watched my videos and said, oh, I've never heard of this band, or I never heard of this guy, and now because you did this video, I check them out now. But Rick Beato, I don't know, do you ever check out his channel, Rick Beato?
No, I haven't.
He's amazing. He's like the king. Yeah, he's like the king of guitar YouTube, but he had a lot of issues with this, and he said that there are actually certain bands that are like famous for reporting these things. Like he said, the Eagles have like a staff of people who they literally have a 9 to 5 job Monday through Friday, where they just sit in an office and they go through the internet and try to find videos that people are monetizing using like Eagles material. Also, like the Beatles, apparently Jimi Hendrix, which is weird because they're, I don't know who's behind the scenes for those two, but so that's like an interesting thing, and I hope to see some changes with that, because you're allowed to do it in a college setting. In colleges, if you're going to school for music, the teacher can play an example of a song and teach off of that, and they're making money off of the universities and stuff like that. So it's weird. I'd like to see changes with that in terms of like the long-term stuff, because that does it's just I feel like they keep putting more and more roadblocks in the way of musicians, because, way back in the day before our time, like you basically made your money off of touring and from record sales. And then the record sales kind of started to not become a thing as much because of streaming and downloading and stuff like that. And I noticed that firsthand when I went on tour with Mid-Atlantic Tidal a few years ago. We did this 2-week tour down south, and the majority of the money that we made on the tour was from selling t-shirts, not even selling CDs, because CDs are almost becoming obsolete now. So you take away the CDs, and then the next best thing is performing and touring. And now that's been taken away because of COVID. So it's like, there has to be some more resources that musicians can utilize to try to, make a living off of this stuff. Cause it's a very tricky way to make a living, for sure, especially now.
Yeah, and we don't want to lose that, that's for sure. And it sounds like what you're kind of hinting at is that maybe the digital age hasn't quite caught up, or sorry, the laws and regulations haven't quite caught up with the digital age. There's some antiquated ways of thinking about it. And you're right. Yeah, it is kind of frustrating how those usage laws, but as you said, I can see the other side of the coin where bands aren't making money in the same ways they used to. They got to look for any way to do that. Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22, because if you were a band expecting certain royalties and you think your music's being exploited, I don't know, I might not be okay with it, but I'm not one of those situations, so I see it differently. I'm like, well, this is a way to share and explore music, and if you're just using it for instructional, and now kids are going to be learning about music they wouldn't have otherwise. Yeah, it's a tough thing, man.
Yeah, anytime you're watching any of those YouTubers, anytime somebody is playing like a snippet of a real song, that automatically disqualifies the video from being monetized. So and that was kind of a shock for me to learn, because a lot of these YouTubers that I follow, these incredible teachers and stuff like that, a lot of their videos, they just have to demonetize them, and they either rely on a Patreon or selling books or selling different things. So that's one thing that I did do as of recently. I set up a Patreon, and I kind of adjusted some of the videos that I made, where I'll do like a lesson video and I'll do half of it on YouTube, and then I'll say, like, if you want the other half, it's on the Patreon. And that's a really interesting way to go about doing it, because I had done that for years. Like, I followed a lot of political YouTubers and I really liked their channels, and I would just donate like $1 a month to their Patreon. And for me, I don't even notice that $1 is missing, but you get enough people coming together, just doing something like that, supporting somebody that they, appreciate and value, that can definitely add up, and like I said, it's in a good format, because if it's a small enough amount of money, people won't even think about it. I mean, think about how many people will spend $4 for a cup of coffee at Starbucks and not even think about it,
Yeah, no, you're right. There are little workarounds and ways that we can, people can still make a living or some kind of income off of, the online way of doing things. And I mean, I guess it's going to be developing just as everything is. So I guess maybe tell people where they can find your stuff. What are your specific channels or handles? How can people look you up and get involved with what you're doing, and maybe contribute if they feel so inclined. I mean, I'm sure that would be something everybody who's listening would want to know. Like, hey, I want to help this guy out. How do I do it?
Oh, that's nice of you. Yeah, and everybody that's listening, I mean, don't feel obligated at all. But if you check out my channel and you like what I have to offer and you want to contribute, the YouTube is youtube.com/Mike Godette Music. The last name is Godette. And if you go on there, it's got links for everything, for the Patreon and everything else that's related to that. Before we wrap it up, though, I want to ask you guys something, because I don't know you guys that well. I'm curious. What have you guys been? What have you guys? I always like to ask people this. What have you guys been listening to lately?
All Them Witches. All Them Witches is a band that we like a lot. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard from Australia. They're kind of in the like, I don't know what you'd call it, psychedelic stoner, hard rock, experimental rock. I mean, definitely rooted in the classic rock sort of thing. I like a lot of that stuff. I've been listening to Shania Twain a lot lately because I like the Mutt Lange production. You go from like AC/DC, Def Leppard, and then Shania Twain, and I'm hearing the Mutt Lange like chorus vocals behind stuff. I'm like, these are good songs.
Sturgill.
I don't know if I've ever heard a song by Shania Twain.
If you listen, you will actually recognize more than you think, probably.
What is that? Did she do Redneck Woman?
No, she did Damn, I Feel Like a Woman and Still the One. You know, they're kind of like 90s.
I don't know. The first band that you said, that Australian band, it's funny because the Australian kid that I was giving lessons to, he gave me like a list of Australian bands to check out, and that was one of them.
King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard?
No, the other. You said another
All
one,
Them
right?
Witches.
Or
All
was
the
that the
Witches was
Australian?
U.S.
No, King Gizzard is the
I'm sorry,
Australian.
no, it was King Gizzard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
and they said Zeitgeist Freedom Energy Exchange was the other one. I don't know if you heard of them.
I have not, but I have now, and I'll probably check them out based on the name. But there's a lot of cool rock coming out of Australia, and I dig that. But Sturgill Simpson's another.
AC/DC was from Australia.
Oh yeah,
Sturgill Simpson, yeah.
he's another guy that we
There's
like.
so much music I haven't heard.
Yeah, likewise, man. It's like especially now that everything's so available and easily accessible, it kind of cheapens it in some ways because you don't have the physical thing that you're like, I paid for this, I better spend some time with it, and you can just no, I don't know. But again, that makes it that much more poignant for me, at least when I do find something that I latch onto. It's like, I've been in this sea of nothing. Now I finally found something that I like. Oh, I'm going to tell everybody about this.
It's crazy. I was talking to a friend the other day. We were listening to Hello Nasty by the Beastie Boys. He had it on vinyl. And I was like, I remember that album from when I was a kid. Let's put it on. And I remember it's just so crazy how much the technology has evolved in our lifetime, because I remember when I first heard the song Intergalactic, I would always hear it on the radio and I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know who it was by. And like the only way you can find it out was hopefully the guy would say it on the radio after they played it. So I remember one time he said it was by, I heard Beastie Boys. I was like, okay, I know it's the Beastie Boys. And then I went to a record store at one point and I just said to him, I was like, do you have the Beastie Boys? And they showed me, where the Beastie Boys were. And I bought the album or the CD, and I was just taking a chance. Like, I didn't even know like if the song was going to be, I didn't know what the song was called or anything. And I'm like skimming through the tracks. And then, I get to the track with Intergalactic and I got so excited, like that feeling of like discovering something that almost seems like hidden in a way that is just completely gone from like now, like I'll be watching a TV show on Amazon and there's a really cool song like going on in the background and you just press pause and it shows you the name of the song that's playing in the scene. It's like so easy now. So I feel like that element has definitely it does cheapen it in a way. I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, well, I guess it's the modern age where everything's accessible in that way. But I agree. Yeah, it's like something about that natural discovery, of music. But there's still ways to do that, and having the ability to spread stuff out on the internet, I think is great in a lot of ways. And so, I think that's a good approach that you're taking in taking advantage of what's being afforded to us now. And you're spreading yourself out and putting, your content out there that you care about. And hopefully that draws a lot of people, man, because it sounds like you're very passionate and committed to what you're doing. So I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully this is not our last conversation, because I've enjoyed this quite a lot.
Yeah, no, me too. And you're free to come on my channel anytime you want, any of you guys. Like I said, I do a lot of top 10 videos where we pick an artist and we do our top 10 songs and we talk about it. I'm doing one tomorrow night for Meshuggah, so doing a metal one. But if you guys I'll send you guys a message on Instagram if you ever want to do one of those. I would love to have you.
Yes, I absolutely do. I'd love to do that, man. So until we meet again, thanks everybody for listening, watching. We love you all. Bye.